He walked quietly across the lobby, head bowed low, pushing the janitor's cart as if apologizing just for existing in a skyscraper built of glass and ambition. Where $1 million contracts were signed behind soundproof doors, there was a man, nobody. Notice that a man invisible in a world of brilliance. And yet it was him, Arthur Finch, who did the impossible because the little girl everyone in the building feared, the daughter of billionaire Victoria Sterling, was untouchable. That girl Lila Sterling had once been the smile of the entire empire. Now there was only silence. 8 nannies had come and gone. Therapists had given up. She screamed when treated with kindness, cried when anyone touched her, and locked her heart behind invisible walls. Until one seemingly ordinary afternoon, Arthur was mopping the marble floor near the elevators when he heard a soft sob behind a column. He stopped, set the mop aside, and walked closer. Then he knelt down slowly, carefully, as if afraid to break something fragile from in the pocket of his shirt. He took out a small object, something that looked ordinary, but somehow made the whole world stand still for a few seconds. And then miraculously, the girl stopped crying. No one in the company knew what had just happened to one. Knew that the man pushing the cleaning cart had once been a wonderful father until he lost everything and Victoria Sterling. The powerful woman she was about to witness something that would change her life forever if you believe that small acts of kindness can save an entire world. Hit subscribe so you won't miss the next part of the story, because tell me, a man who's lost everything, can he really save a child who's losing herself on the 30th floor of Sterling Global Dynamics in the heart of Manhattan? The glass walls reflected the light of the entire city below in a silence so deep she could hear her own heartbeat. Victoria Sterling stood motionless, eyes fixed on her computer screen, and it was the 9th psychological report about her. Daughter Lila patient completely rejects strangers. Severe PTSD symptoms, no response to cognitive behavioral therapy, no response to play therapy, psychiatric intervention recommended, suggestion short-term hospitalization. Victoria slowly closed the laptop number. Not again at 41, the CEO of a $2 billion biotech empire, a woman who commanded 2,000 employees, negotiated with governments, and made decisions that affected millions of lives, now stood powerless before a 7-year-old child since the day Richard Sterling, her husband, her daughter's father, and the family's anchor died in a plane crash 3 months ago. Lila had become a shadow of herself. Those eyes, only 7 years old, carried a hollowness most adults would never dare to face. 3 months earlier, Lila had been the light of this office. She ran into her mother's room holding a drawing made with crayons. "Mom, look, I drew us 3 people. You, Daddy, and me?" Richard laughed, lifted his daughter into his arms, and spun her around to, "You know, your mom is the smartest woman in the world I know." Lila giggled, "But Daddy's the best." Their laughter filled the room back then. Only the hum of the air conditioner remained and the cold scent of printer paper. The framed photos still sat neatly on the shelf, but the life inside them was gone. Victoria opened the special room designed just for Lila, filled with toys, sketchbooks, warm lights, and cameras in every corner. In the far corner, Lila sat, curled up, clutching an old doll, the last gift from her father. "Lila, sweetheart." Victoria knelt down, trying to keep her voice calm today. "We're going to meet a new doctor. She's very nice. You'll know." The scream tore through the room. "I don't want any doctors. I want Daddy back." The doll flew across the room and hit the door. Victoria froze her, hands trembling. A woman who could run a global empire didn't know how to hold her own daughter. The child had built a wall around herself, and no matter how powerful Victoria Sterling was, she couldn't find the door in for 3 months. She had tried everything. The first nanny, Mrs. Hayes, with 25 years of experience, quit after 4 days when Lila locked her out on the balcony for 2 hours. The second, Diana, a specialist in caring for children with special needs, left after 6 days when she woke up to find a handful of her hair had been cut off from the 3rd to the 8th nanny. None lasted more than a week, and the therapists, Dr. Hayes from Yale Lila, stayed silent through 5 sessions. Dr. Miller, a PTSD expert, Lila screamed until she turned blue the moment she walked in. Every professional after that wrote the same line in their reports: "This child needs time or a miracle." But Victoria Sterling no longer believed in miracles. Her phone rang. The voice of the HR director came through, cautious yet tense. "Mrs. Sterling, the board is becoming concerned about your personal situation. Your recent absences from meetings could affect us." "No, Victoria, cut her off, I'll handle it." But the truth was, she didn't know where to start. 3 flights canceled, 2 key contracts, rejected company stock down more than 12%, and investors had started asking, is this CEO still capable of running? Her company, yet the woman who once controlled the world, was losing the one thing she could never replace, her daughter. That night, Victoria sat alone in her office outside the city, gleamed like molten gold reflected on the cold glass on her desk lay. An old folder wedding photos of her and Richard, pictures of baby Lila, snapshots from their summer trip to Italy last year. Richard's voice echoed in her memory, deep, warm, gentle, like a distant melody. "You know, Victoria, you can be better than anyone. Else, but what I love most about you is how you love Lila without ever needing to prove it." She smiled faintly, a trembling smile like a crack in flawless glass, because now she was failing at both being a great CEO and being a whole mother when the first tear in 3 months fell onto the desk. The lights of Manhattan shimmered in her eyes. If the entire city were crying with Victoria Sterling, 6 a.m., the old apartment complex in Queens still lay shrouded in damp, cold darkness. The alarm had rung at 5:30. Arthur Finch shut it off and sat up without turning on the light. He was used to the dark. It had been his only loyal companion for years. 8 years old, but he looked at least 10 years older. Silver streaks touched both temples. His deep brown eyes held lines etched by sleepless nights and long years of loneliness. He walked into the next room, a small empty space, just a single bed, a desk and photos taped to the wall, pictures of a little boy, straw blonde hair, a missing front tooth, blue eyes clear as the June sky. Leo Arthur stood still for a few seconds, as if reluctant to leave every morning. He stopped before the largest photo. Leo smiling, hugging a stuffed dog. "Good night, my little boy," he whispered, even though the sun was just rising. Then he quietly closed the door, carrying that familiar weight in his chest, a heaviness that had never gone away. 6 years earlier, the small apartment had once been full of laughter. "Daddy, look, I built a castle." 5-year-old Leo sat in the middle of the floor, surrounded by a riot of colorful Lego bricks. The castle leaned slightly, ready to topple, but in his eyes it was a whole kingdom. Arthur knelt down, smiling, and pulled his son into his arms. "It's beautiful. My boy's a genius architect." "You?" "Mean it, Dad. I mean it. You can be anything you want, then. I'll build a castle for you to live in for me." "Why is that?" "Because you deserve it. You're the best dad in the world." Arthur said nothing more. He just hugged his son tightly, fighting back tears. He didn't know it would be the last time he heard that laugh, now in the packed subway car. Arthur sat silently in a corner, wearing his navy blue janitor uniform. The Apex Custodial Services logo on his chest was frayed around him. Everyone stared at their phones. No one looked at anyone else. He opened his worn canvas bag, a cold lunchbox, an apple, a small notebook, and a cloth pouch. Inside that pouch was his whole world handmade toys. A patched teddy bear, a felt rabbit, a tiny wooden car, clumsy, imperfect, but every stitch and every carved edge carried the warmth of something money could never buy. Once Arthur had been a preschool teacher at a small private school in Brooklyn. He loved that job, loved the children, loved how they saw the world. Through clear, innocent eyes, he was married to Sarah Bennett, a nurse at a children's hospital. They had Leo, and though life was modest, their little home overflowed with laughter. Each night when Sarah worked the night shift, Arthur would tell Leo bedtime. Stories, not from books, but from his imagination. Once upon a time, there was a rabbit who couldn't hop all. The other rabbits laughed at him, but he didn't give up. He practiced every day, and one day he jumped higher than all the rest. Leo tilted his head. "Dad, why didn't the rabbit give up because he knew a secret?" "What secret?" "That what makes us special isn't what we're good at. It's that we never give up on our dreams." Leo nodded, eyes sparkling. "Then I'll never give up." "Either," Arthur laughed, ruffling his son's hair. He didn't know that was the last night he'd ever tell Leo a story. The accident happened on a fall afternoon. Leaves scattering across the road. Sarah was driving Leo home from school. A truck lost control. Devastating crash at Midtown. Crossing intersection. Sarah survived with wounds that would never truly heal Leo. Didn't Arthur got the call while teaching. He bolted out of the classroom and ran like a madman to the hospital. His heart pounded like it was about to burst when the doctor stepped out. One look in those sorrowful eyes told him everything. Arthur collapsed to the floor, screaming soundlessly. Sarah never forgave herself. It's my fault. I wasn't paying attention. I killed our son. No, Sarah, Arthur said, holding her trembling. Hand it was an accident. No, I should have died instead. They tried to go on, but the little house was no longer a home. Every room was a nightmare. Arthur couldn't step into Leo's room. Sarah couldn't bear to look at family photos 6 months later. He woke to find a letter on the kitchen table. Dear Arthur, I can't live with this pain anymore every day. I see Leo's face, hear his laughter, then realize it's just in my head. I'm not as strong as you. I'm sorry, I love you, but I have to go. Sarah, she left that night and never came back. Arthur searched everywhere, hospitals, relatives' homes, even mental health centers, but Sarah had vanished as if she'd never existed. He lost his son then, his wife, and after that, he slowly began to lose himself. He couldn't return to teaching. He couldn't look at children without seeing Leo's face among them. He quit, sold the apartment, moved to Queens in the years that followed. Arthur did everything. Waiter, driver, mover, whatever, paid the bills, until he found a job at Apex Custodial Services, an outsourced janitorial company for corporate buildings. When the manager asked why he wanted the job, he answered simply because no one notices the janitor, and I don't want to be seen anymore, but there was one thing Arthur never gave up. Every night after work he sat alone under the weak yellow light, stitching scraps of old fabric, carving bits of wood, making toys, the way he once did for Leo a teddy bear. From an old shirt, a rabbit from worn, felt a wooden car from popsicle sticks. He didn't know why he still did it. Maybe because when those little things took shape, he felt Leo was still there, smiling, running, calling out Daddy, just like before, and sometimes in dreams he could still hear his son's voice. Dad, you make the best toys each time that happened. He'd smile through his tears because that tiny echo of love was the only reason he was still alive. Wednesday afternoon, the Sterling Global Dynamics. Building shimmered under the fading sunlight. Arthur Finch had been working there for 2 months. He arrived before 6 every morning, quietly mopping floors, emptying trash cans, tidying up conference rooms. No one called him by name. They just knew him as the janitor on the 30th floor, but while everyone else raced through million-dollar reports and high-stakes deals, Arthur noticed the small things. He noticed the little girl who always sat alone in the executive hallway where light poured through. The glass walls, cold and sterile as ice. She wore an oversized hoodie hair loosely tied, clutching a worn-out doll. He didn't look at anyone, didn't speak. Her eyes stayed fixed on the floors, if the world outside no longer held anything worth seeing. But those eyes, Arthur recognized them instantly. They were the eyes of a child who had lost a piece of her soul, the same look Leo had in his final days. He shook his head, trying to push the memory away, and went back to his work the fateful day Thursday. Afternoon 3 wound. The 30th floor lobby was nearly empty. Most employees had gone to the cafe or were locked away in meetings. Arthur was mopping the marble floor near the elevators when he heard it. A faint sound buried beneath the hum of the air conditioner. A loud cry, but a muffled one, shaky, restrained, filled with despair. He froze, listened. The sound came from behind the last marble column at the end of the hall, a hidden corner with no security cameras. Where the light dimmed, he hesitated, and he knew he wasn't supposed to interfere. A janitor didn't belong in the world up there, but that cry, it pulled something deep inside him. Memories of Leo trembling through nightmares, whispering Daddy in fear before he even realized it. Arthur's feet were already moving toward the sound behind the column. Lila Sterling sat curled up, her knees pulled tight against her chest, face buried in her arms. Her small body shook, not from cold, but from pain that swallowed her whole. Arthur stopped keeping a respectful 3-step distance. He said nothing. Then slowly he knelt. His knees touched the cold marble. The sound dry and hollow in the silence. Lila didn't look up, but her breathing changed shorter. Uneven, she could feel someone there. Arthur stayed quiet. He simply sat there beside her, motionless. 5 seconds. Then 10. Then long era. Gentle stillness filled the space between them. He set the mop aside, quietly, reached into his pocket and took out a small object. A teddy bear he had sewn it the night before using. A scrap from his old sweater, faded brown clumsy stitches, one ear, larger than the other two button eyes, shiny. Yet sad, Arthur placed the bear on the floor halfway between them. No words, no gestures. He just sat there, slightly leaning back, keeping the safe distance, no pressure, no demands. Only presence time seemed to stop a minute, then two. Lila slowly lifted her head. Her eyes were swollen, lashes stuck together with tears. She looked at the bear-thin, at the quiet man sitting across from her. Arthur didn't smile. He simply nodded once gently, his eyes kind and calm as a breeze. The girl reached out trembling and touched the bear, then she hugged it tight. The fabric was soft, warm, and it smelled like safety, like a person, like something long lost. But real, and for the first time in 3 months, Lila stopped crying. Not because someone told her to stop, but because at last she felt allowed to be weak, to hurt without being judged. Arthur stayed there silent. He gave her time to breathe, to settle to just be after 5 minutes. He quietly stood, picked up his mop, and walked away. Never once, looking back upon the 30th floor in an office surrounded by glass. Victoria Sterling stared at the security footage, the image of a man in a blue uniform. Kneeling beside her daughter, saying nothing, just placing a clumsy little teddy bear on the floor made her chest tighten painfully. She raised both hands to her mouth. Tears streamed down her face, dripping onto the keyboard. She had just witnessed a miracle. And the man who performed it was someone no one had cared to notice for the past 2 months. The next morning, Victoria Sterling arrived at the office earlier than usual. She hadn't slept the whole night. She'd sat watching that same security footage again and again, dozens of times. That man. The janitor on the 30th floor. What had he done to Lila? He hadn't spoken, hadn't touched her. He had simply sat there, quiet, simple, patient. And then Lila stopped crying. Victoria still couldn't understand. How could a stranger, untrained, unqualified, do what 9 professionals had failed to do? She grabbed the phone, her voice urgent. I need information on the janitor from the 30th floor, male, mid-30s to 40. Brown hair, the HR manager's voice crackled through. The speaker? You must mean Arthur Finch. He's with Apex Custodial Services, an outsourced contractor. I want his file. Now, an hour later, the file appeared on her screen. Name Arthur Finch. Complete file, married to Sarah Bennett 2. 0130. Son, Leo Blackwell, born the same year. October 15th, 2018, severe traffic collision. Sarah was driving their son home when her car was struck by a truck at the Midtown Crossing intersection. Sarah survived mild brain injury, fractured ribs. Leo, age 5, died 3 hours later at the hospital. Victoria covered her mouth, her breath-catching tears welled in her eyes as she read on after the accident Arthur Finch requested. Indefinite leave, never returned to teaching. Sarah Bennett admitted twice. 2, psychiatric care for major depression and suicidal intent in April 2. 2019, she left home without leaving an address. Arthur relocated to Queens, living alone. No criminal record, no debts, neighbors said. Quiet man. He sits in the park, watches. The kids play but never goes near them. Victoria closed the file, her heart heavy now. She understood Arthur wasn't just a man who happened to help Lila. He was a father trying to save another child because he couldn't save his own. That afternoon, Victoria summoned Arthur to her office, not the main boardroom, but a smaller, warmer space she used when she wanted to escape the cold world of numbers and negotiations. Arthur entered uneasy. Sit down, Victoria said, motioning to the chair across from her. Sat back straight, hands folded stiffly on his knees. Victoria slid the folder across the desk. I know about Leo, Arthur. Froze, his knuckles turned white. She continued, her voice soft but steady. I'm sorry, no father deserves to endure that. Arthur said nothing. His jaw trembled slightly. Victoria took a breath, her voice breaking. I lost my husband 3 months ago, plane crash. He was on his way home. Lila and I were waiting at the airport. Her words faltered. Then the phone rang. They said the plane went down, no survivors. Arthur looked up, eyes warm and sincere. I'm so sorry, he said quietly. Thank you, Victoria nodded. But I wanted to tell you this. I understand your pain, and I think you understand. Lila's Arthur's voice grew low, thoughtful. She feels like part of her died, and nothing can fill that space. Victoria nodded, tears shimmering. Yes, but you did what no one else could. You made her feel allowed to hurt, to cry, to remember. Arthur exhaled slowly. That's all I ever wished someone had told me. After Leo died, everyone said, be strong, move on. But I didn't want to move on. I wanted to grieve. I wanted to remember him. Victoria wiped her eyes gently. You still make toys for Leo, don't you? Arthur looked surprised. How do you know? I noticed every toy you've given. Lila and made, sewn with care and love. Arthur smiled faintly, the sadness in it unmistakable. Yes, I make one every night, so I can feel like he's still here somewhere, and now you give them to Lila. Maybe that's what Leo would want. Maybe that's how he still helps other children through me. Victoria stood and walked to the window. Afternoon light fell softly across her tired but gentle face. Arthur, I'd like to ask you something. Not for the company, for my daughter. Arthur looked up. What is it you want me to do? Stay not as a janitor, but as Lila's friend, someone she trusts. Arthur hesitated, then spoke quietly. But I'm not a therapist. I have no credentials. You have something. No degree can teach heart and understanding what will people say. I don't care what they say, Victoria replied firmly. I care about my daughter, and for the first time in 3 months, she smiled because of you. Arthur sat in silence for a long moment, then he nodded. I'll stay, but on one condition. What condition? I don't want Lila to think I'm replacing her father. I'm just a friend, someone who listens. Victoria smiled softly and nodded. That's exactly what I want too, and about Leo. Please, let's keep that between us. I promise. Arthur stood and extended his hand. Victoria took it, not the handshake of a CEO and her employee, but of two people learning to live again after loss. But there was someone else who knew Lila Shea was more perceptive than anyone realized one afternoon. As Arthur was telling a story, she suddenly asked Mr. Arthur, Do you have a child? Arthur froze. His heart thudded. Why do you ask? Because you tell stories just like my dad. He told them the same way. Arthur swallowed hard, voice trembling. I used to. Where is your child? He's not here anymore, like my dad. Yes, like your dad. Lila was quiet for a while, then placed her tiny hand over his. Are you sad? Arthur smiled sadly. Yes, glistening every day. Me too, every day. I miss my dad. Their hands, one big one, small clasped tightly together. No more words. Were needed. What was your child's name? Lila asked. Leo, did he like your stories? She loved them. Then, when you tell them to me, he's listening too. Right? Arthur's throat tightened. He could barely speak. He simply nodded. Lila hugged her teddy bear and whispered, then, I'll listen carefully for me and for Leo. And at that moment, Arthur wept for the first time in 6 years. He cried in front of a child, not from pain, but because at last he had begun to heal. Rumors spread through Sterling global dynamics like wildfire. By mid-morning, everyone had heard the same story. The CEO hired a janitor to care for her daughter. Didn't take long for the board of directors to call an emergency meeting. 40th floor, the air inside the conference room was tight as a drawn bowstring. Victoria Chen, 58, silver hair neatly combed, senior board member, stood up. Her voice cool but measured. Victoria, we've always respected you, but this decision, it's incomprehensible. Mr. Finch is a janitor. He has no psychological certification if anything goes wrong. This company faces serious legal liability. Victoria's tone stayed calm. Her eyes locked on Victoria Chen's. Help my daughter, David Park. Another member interjected, Are you aware he lost a child that could influence how he interacts with Lila? Victoria rose, her voice low but sharp as steel. I know exactly what happened to him. And that's precisely why he understands my daughter better than anyone. Few others started to speak, but Victoria cut them off. That's enough. This is my decision. Anyone who disagrees is free to leave the table right. Now, silence fell over the room. Victoria Chen sighed, shaking her head. Victoria, you're acting out of emotion, not logic. Victoria met her gaze, her voice deep but unwavering emotion for 3 months. My daughter hasn't spoken, hasn't smiled. She just stares into nothing. All your so-called experts have failed. Typical one man, no title, no degree. Made her smile. So, don't talk to me about logic. Logic can't save my child. No one said another word. A week later, the storm hit the front page of the City Tribune, screamed a sensational headline. Billionaire Victoria Pierce hires janitor to care for daughter scandal. Or desperation, the article spread like a virus, sources inside Sterling Global Dynamics. Confirmed that CEO Victoria Sterling hired janitor Arthur Finch to accompany her daughter after the tragic death of her husband. Finch, 38, has no psychological credentials. He is a former preschool teacher who quit after a family tragedy. Is this an act of compassion or a mother's emotional breakdown? Within hours, social media exploded. Hashtags Victoria Pierce and Arthur Finch climbed to the top of the trending list. Supporters wrote, "She's just a mother trying to save her child. You don't need a degree. To heal, you need." Heart critics fired back. "This is a scandal. She's blinded by emotion. That man could be dangerous. What do we really know about him?" Victoria said, nothing publicly, but inside, she knew the storm was only beginning. 3 days later, the City Metro Police received an anonymous complaint. Arthur Finch is behaving suspiciously around a child that afternoon. 2 police officers arrived at the Sterling Global Dynamics headquarters. Arthur was in the ground floor cafe with Lila telling her a story about the singing paper boat when a firm voice sounded behind him. "Mr. Arthur Finch." He turned around slowly and nodded. "Yes, we need to speak with you for a moment." Lila startled her eyes. "Why, who are they?" Uncle Arthur knelt slightly, trying to keep his voice calm. "It's all right, sweetheart. They just want to ask a few questions." But panic flashed across the girl's face. She clutched his hand tightly. Tears welling. "No, they'll take you away. Just like they took my dad." The cafe fell silent. Arthur knelt fully, now eye level with her, his voice gentle. "I promise I'm not going anywhere, okay?" But the officer stepped closer. "I'm sorry, sir. You'll need to come with us for questioning at that moment." Another voice rang out strong, commanding. "What's going on here?" Victoria Sterlingona of the officers turned. "Mrs. Sterling, we received a complaint and need to verify some information. Complain about what I'm afraid that's confidential. During investigation." Victoria stepped forward, placing herself between Arthur and Lila. "Mr. Finch works for me. If you want to ask questions, you'll go through Sterling Global's legal team." "Ma'am, we're just doing our job, and I'm doing mine, protecting my employee without a court order you have no right to take." Tense silence filled the space. Finally, one officer murmured, "We'll be back." They turned and left. Lila still clung to Arthur's hand. Victoria looked at him, her eyes both firm and filled with empathy. That night, Arthur went to see Victoria in her office. He was no longer composed. Worry clouded his face. "I think I should leave." Victoria looked up. "No, I'm causing trouble for you and for Lila. You're helping her. That's all that matters." Arthur shook his head, voice breaking. "They won't stop Victoria. They'll dig into my past about Leo, about Sarah, and when they do, they'll turn me into a monster." Victoria stepped closer, her tone steady, resolute. "Then we'll fight." "I don't want to fight," Arthur said, eyes red. "I just want Lila to be safe. She won't be safe." If you walk away, you know that Arthur said nothing. The soft yellow light glowed over both their faces, 2 people who had already lost everything, standing on the edge of another battle, and in that quiet moment, he understood leaving was no longer an option. It was a Thursday night when everything finally seemed to be settling back to normal, and then, in an instant, it all fell apart. Victoria was still in her office, buried under reports and meeting schedules. The clock read 10 p.m. Her phone rang. It was Marisol, the temporary nanny, Mrs. Sterling. "Lila. She's gone." Victoria froze, her heart stopped mid-beat. "What did you just say?" "She was in her room. I just went to the kitchen to grab some water a few minutes. I swear when I came back, the room was empty. She's gone." The phone slipped from Victoria's hand and hit the desk-in. That moment, she wasn't the powerful CEO of Sterling Global Dynamics anymore. She was just a mother in sheer panic. She called security. The police activated the entire building's emergency alert. But before doing any of that, she dialed one number. First, Arthur Lila's missing. Arthur answered the call while driving home the second. He heard the words, "missing child." He slammed the brakes so hard the tires screeched across the asphalt. How long has it been? About 30 minutes? Was she carrying anything? Just her teddy bear and her sketchbook? That was all he needed to hear. Arthur already knew where she was, the old Sterling Global headquarters. The building where Richard Sterling, Victoria's late husband, once worked had been abandoned for 2 years, long ago. Lila had asked Arthur a question. "Uncle Arthur, where did my dad used to work? At the old building near the park. I want to go there someday. That's where his memories are." Right, he had smiled back, then never imagining that one simple memory would lead him to tonight. He sped through the quiet streets until the silhouette of the old tower appeared, its rusted metal sign still faintly reading Sterling Global Headquarters under the pale street light. The main entrance was locked, but Arthur knew another way. The side door, the one janitors once used, he slipped in with an old key. The building was pitch black. "Lila? Where are you?" No answer, only his own echo bouncing off the cold marble wall. She climbed 3rd floor, 4th, and then on the 5th. Richard's old office, he saw a faint glow beneath the door. Arthur pushed it open in the corner of the room. Lila sat curled up, clutching her teddy bear under the beam of a small flashlight. Her cheeks were streaked with tears. "Lila." She looked up, voice trembling. "Uncle Arthur." He ran to her, dropped to his knees, and pulled her into his arms. "You scared me half to death. Why did you run away?" Through sobs, she whispered. "I just wanted to find my dad here. You came here to find him?" Lila nodded, eyes glistening. "This is where he worked. I thought if I came here I'd feel closer to him." Arthur held her tighter. "But, he's not here anymore. But I miss him so much. I want to hear his voice again. I want him to hold me." Her voice broke into quiet sobs. "I don't want to forget him. Uncle Arthur." Arthur lifted her chin, gently meeting her eyes. Those same hazel eyes that mirrored Victoria's and maybe Richard's too. "You'll never forget him. He's in you, every single day. But what if one day I forget what he looks like?" Arthur smiled faintly, his voice as soft as a lullaby. "Then look in the mirror. You have his eyes, his smile, and his heart. Every time you see yourself, he's right there looking back at you." Layla burst into tears, wrapping her arms tightly around him. "But I want him here. I want him to tell me stories again." Arthur held her close, gently rocking her. "I know I want my son here too, every single day." And there in the darkened halls of a forgotten building, 2 souls, both broken by loss, found solace in each other. The sound of heels echoed down the hallway, followed by the beam of flashlights. Victoria appeared in the doorway, flanked by security and police officers. The moment she saw Lila in Arthur's arms, she raised a trembling hand. "Stop," she said softly. Everyone froze. "Lila." The little girl turned around, her eyes still wet. Mom Victoria rushed forward, dropped to her knees, and held her tight. "You scared me to death, sweetheart." Where did you go?" "I'm sorry, Mom. I just wanted to find Dad." Tears spilled down Victoria's cheeks. "I know, baby. I know. I've been looking for him too, every single day." Lila looked up, then turned toward Arthur. "But I don't have Dad anymore. I only have Mom and Uncle Arthur." For a long second, Victoria looked at Arthur, her eyes filled with gratitude, exhaustion, and something deeper. "Thank you. Thank you for finding her." Arthur shook his head, voice trembling. "I didn't find her, ma'am. She found me from the very beginning." And there, in that old dust-covered office, among the ruins of an empire and the ghosts of memory, 3 people stood together. At last, a mother, a father, and a child, not bound by blood, but by the kind of pain that when shared becomes love after the night. Lila disappeared. Victoria Sterling knew she couldn't stay silent any longer. She called a press conference, and that morning, before a room packed with hundreds of reporters and flashing cameras, the CEO of Sterling Global Dynamics stepped up to the podium, her voice calm, steady, but resolute. "My name is Victoria Sterling, and today I want to talk about my daughter." The room fell utterly silent. 3 months ago, I lost my husband, and my daughter lost her father. That kind of pain can't be put into words. I tried everything to help. Lila hired the best specialists, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. Nothing worked until I met Arthur Finch. She paused, letting the silence settle. Her gaze locked on the rows of cameras before her, He's not a doctor. He's not a therapist. He's simply someone who's felt the same pain my daughter feels, and there are things no classroom can teach. A reporter raised a hand. Mrs. Sterling, aren't you worried about your daughter's safety? Victoria took a deep breath, her voice unwavering. My daughter is safer than she's ever been, not because he has a certificate, but because he has a heart, and if this world keeps valuing credentials over compassion, maybe we're the ones who need healing. The room stayed frozen in silence. The only sound left was the relentless clicking of cameras, capturing the image of a mother unafraid to show both her vulnerability and her strength. 1 week later, Victoria announced a new initiative. Leo's Light, a free program for children coping with grief, trauma, or loss. No degrees required, only a heart willing to listen. She asked Arthur Finch to lead it. He refused. At first, I'm not a leader. You're the only one who can do this. Victoria replied, You understand these kids. You know how to make them feel seen and heard. I've never run a program before. Victoria smiled softly. Then we'll learn together. Arthur, finally, agreed. But on one condition, it has to be called Leo's Light, so my son can still be part of it. In his own way, Victoria nodded, gently agreed. A month later, Leo's Light opened on the ground floor of Sterling Global's new headquarters. No glass conference. Rooms, no luxury decor, just a warm, cozy space. Thick rugs, golden light shelves filled with handmade toys. On the main wall hung a photo of Leo smiling, wide his front tooth missing beneath it. A line of words read, Sometimes the brightest light comes from the smallest hearts. During the first week, only 3 children showed up. A 6-year-old boy who'd lost his mother to cancer, an 8-year-old girl caught between 2 homes after her parents. Divorce, a 9-year-old boy bullied daily at school. Arthur sat with them. He didn't teach, he didn't preach, he simply listened. Then he told a story not from a book, from the heart. Once upon a time, there was a little star. It wasn't as bright as the others, so it thought it was useless. But one night, a lost child wandered into the forest, and the star's faint light was enough to guide the child home. From that night on the star, realized our worth isn't measured by how brightly we shine, but by who we shine. For the children listened, eyes wide, breath still as if the world outside had vanished, and in the corner of the room, Lila sat beside a new girl holding her hand. It's okay, Lila whispered. Mr. Arthur will help you. He helped me too. That evening, after all the children had gone, Arthur and Victoria stayed. Behind, in the quiet room, the city glittered through the glass. Beyond them, distant, peaceful, Victoria looked up at Leo's picture and asked softly, Do you ever regret it? Regret what's staying opening up again? Arthur was silent for a moment, his eyes still on the photo. No, at first I thought I didn't deserve to be happy again, but Lila taught me something, that loving again doesn't mean forgetting. Victoria nodded slowly, smiling through her tears. I've learned that too from you. Arthur chuckled lightly. I didn't do anything, you did. Victoria whispered. You showed me that strength isn't about never falling apart. It's about getting back up and helping someone else stand with you. They sat there for a long time. No words, no need. That silence itself was peace, the kind both had been searching for all along Saturday evening. Arthur stopped by Victoria and Lila's home, no longer a high-rise penthouse, but a small, warm apartment in Brooklyn. I wanted to start over, Victoria had once said. Lila opened the Dr. Beaming Uncle Arthur, you're here. She tugged him inside, leading the way to the kitchen. The table was neatly set, no lavish dishes, just pasta salad and toasted bread. I made it myself, she declared proudly. You did it. Smells amazing, Arthur laughed. Mom only helped a little. I did. The rest, Victoria watched them. A strange warmth blooming inside the kind she thought she'd lost forever, the day. Richard died during dinner. Lila talked excitedly about Leo's Lida. New boy came today. He was really sad, but when Uncle Arthur told his story, he smiled. Mom, Victoria, looked at her daughter, then at Arthur. Her voice softened. Thank you for what? For giving my daughter back to me. Arthur shook his head gently. No, ma'am, she was never lost. I just helped. You see her again after dinner. Lila pulled Arthur into her room. She pointed to a large drawing taped to the wall, colorful, clumsy, but full of heart. 4 figures stood together. Tall man, Richard, a woman, Victoria, a little girl, Lila, and another man. Beside Arthur stood a small boy holding his hand. "That's Leo," Lila said with a shy smile. "I drew him here so he wouldn't feel lonely." Arthur went still speechless. He knelt and hugged her, tight tears streaming down. But this time they weren't from grief. They were gratitude. "Thank you, Lila. Thank you so much." In that small, softly lit room where past and present quietly met, they didn't just find each other again. They found themselves. Because sometimes healing doesn't begin with forgetting. It begins. When you dare to love again 1 year later, Leo's light was no longer just a small room in the lobby. It had grown into 10 centers across the city, reaching more than 200 children and dozens of volunteers. Not professionals with fancy titles, but people who had known pain and chose to stay to help others find their way out of the dark. And among them, Arthur Finch was no longer the invisible man. He had become a mentor, a guide of quiet light, and above all, a father, not by blood, but by heart, at the anniversary celebration. Arthur was invited to speak. He stood before hundreds, children, parents, volunteers, even the journalists who once doubted him. His hands trembled slightly. "I'm not a great speaker," he began softly. "I'm just a father who once lost his child." The hall fell still. You could hear the breath of the crowd. 6 years ago, I lost Liam's son, 5 years old, in a car accident at that time. I thought that was the end of fatherhood, the end of every kind of love. I knew his eyes drifted to the front, row where Lila sat beside Victoria, holding her mother's hand, beaming up at him. But then a little girl showed me that love never really ends, it only changes form. Leo isn't here anymore, but he lives in every story I tell, in every child I help, in every smile. I see his voice broke slightly, and that's why. Leo's light isn't just for children who are hurting. It's for the grown UPS tooth ones who've forgotten that we can still love even after our hearts have been broken. When he bowed his head, the whole room rose to its feet. Applause thundered, echoing through the hall, and Lila ran onto the stage, throwing her arms around him. "Love you, Uncle Arthur." He hugged her tightly, tears glistening. "I love you too, Lila." After the ceremony, Victoria and Arthur stood together on the rooftop terrace looking out over the glittering night skyline of New York. Soft breeze carried the faint scent of rain. Victoria spoke quietly. "Can you believe it? A year ago, I was a desperate mother, and you were the invisible man." Arthur smiled, and now she turned to him, her eyes gentle. "Now we're a family." Arthur blinked, unsure he'd heard. "Right, a family," Victoria nodded, her voice warm. "Lila sees you as her second father, and too, see you as a friend, a brother, a piece of our lives I didn't know." We needed. Arthur looked down at his hands, a small smile forming. "I never thought I'd get a second chance, but that little girl, Lila, she saved me and you saved her," Victoria said softly. Touching his hand, they stood there in silence, watching. The city lights shimmer below. Two people who had once lost everything finally finding peace. Victoria asked Arthur, "Do you ever think about the future? Why do you ask?" "Because I want you to stay, not just with the program, but with us, with Lila, with me." Arthur turned surprised. "Are you saying?" She smiled before he could finish. "I'm not talking about romance, Arthur. I'm talking about family, the kind made from souls once broken who still choose to love, not perfect, but real." Arthur looked at her for a long time, then nodded slowly. "I want that too. I'm just afraid." "Afraid of what? Of losing again?" Victoria squeezed his hand. "Then we'll be afraid together and heal together." For the first time in 6 years, Arthur's heart no longer felt empty. Sunday morning, Central Park. Lila was on the swing set. Victoria gently pushing, her Arthur sat on a nearby bench, smiling softly. As he watched beside him lay a photo album, pictures of Leo grinning with his missing tooth, pictures of Lila, her hair blowing in the wind, and one photo of all three of them together. Victoria, Lila, and Arthur, not a traditional family, but one built from love, not replacement, but continuation. "Uncle Arthur, come push me," Lila called out. He laughed, jetting up. "All right, princess, your turn." Laughter filled the morning air. Victoria watched them. Tears falling silently, not of sorrow but of joy. Sometimes miracles don't come from experts. They come from ordinary people, people who understand pain because they've lived it. Arthur Finch wasn't a hero. He was simply a father who lost his son, but through that loss, he found another child not to replace Leo. But to honor him and Lila, the girl no one could reach now runs, laughs and lives because someone saw her, sat beside her, and didn't try to fix her. He simply stayed quiet, patient, loving. That's the real miracle. Not healing completely, but learning to live with the wound together. Today, Leo's light operates in more than 30 cities, helping over 5. Everyone has 0 children and families. If you or someone you know is living through loss, remember you're not alone and the light is still there. The sun dipped low over the park. Lila's laughter echoed as the swing rose higher, while Arthur and Victoria sat side by side, silent, peaceful, needing no more words. The story ends, but the healing continues. Because within each of us, there is in Leo's light, small flicker that may lose its way but still has the power to guide someone home. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment below. What moment made your heart tremble the most? I read every comment like letters from strangers who somehow feel close. And if you want to keep walking with stories of loss, courage, and healing, don't forget, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story. Turn on notifications, because maybe the next story will be yours.